It's Friday, December 29th. I'm Matt Harmon. Welcome to the Yahoo Fantasy Football Show. It is a hell of a day to talk ball, and joining me to do just that is Scott Pianowski. Scott, it's week 17. What's going on, buddy?
Excited, man. We made it. Hopefully a lot of you have made it to the money week. Get some good matchups. Maybe the whole entire slate isn't as juicy as it could be, but man, the binge choices this week are really fun. We have some standalone games that are fun. So I'm looking forward to trying to figure this stuff out and get people to their championship parades and the ticker tape and the hats on sideways and all that. Let's do this.
Hell yeah, buddy. I'm ready to help launch the people, maybe even launch ourselves in a couple spots to some fantasy glory. You mentioned the binge category. You know what we do here on the Viewer's Guide. We give you the games you need to binge, the games you need to stream, and the games you need to skip. And this week is a really interesting one, Scott, because the binge category is light. Only 2 games in the binge category. And I don't think I've done that all year, but those 2 games certainly stand out above the crowd. But the stream category is very beefy. So we are definitely going to have to do our best to try to pick these contests apart. Let's start with that binge category. We've got Lions at Cowboys. It's the highest over-under of the week. Of course it is. It has to be. So many different directions we can take this game, but I want to start on the Dallas side. We were talking about the Cowboys a little bit, of course, with producer Colin before the show got started. And the one thing that stood out to me, Scott, is just like, how is Dallas not going to drop back to pass like 40 to 50 times in this game against that Lions secondary?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the last time we saw the Lions, they stuffed Ty Chandler into a pretzel. He did get the little touchdown deodorant, but he didn't go anywhere. And Tony Pollard, we were having a nice little powwow about Tony Pollard, about how do we explain his season. Colin was talking about how it's unlikely that Pollard will be with the team next year. We know those running back windows just don't stay open as long as we think. It's become a one contract position for a lot of teams. And then they just say, okay, let's get another cheap guy in here. Let's draft somebody in the 3rd or 4th round. So I feel sorry for just Tony Pollard was such a fun player when he wasn't the starter. And when he finally got to be a starter, everything went wrong. I think he's been hurt most of the year. The offensive line at times has had cluster injuries. He's had difficulties, you and Dalton talked about, punching it in from short distance. And I think at this point, Dallas is like, hey, what do we do well? We throw the ball. What do we do well? CeeDee Lamb. What do we do well? Dak Prescott. And it just matches up with Detroit, where they pretty good against the run. They obviously have been beaten on the back end all year. And you mentioned this isn't just the highest total of the week, 53.5, which in a year where scoring has been down a little bit, a year where obviously quarterbacks have been hurt all over the place, coordinators have been fired. We've seen so much uncertainty and so much erratic offense that to see a game like this, it's Saturday night, it's standalone, 2 playoff teams. Let's go. Let it rip, man. You are going to have to score 30 points to win this game.
Yeah, Andy and I fielded a question from a listener on the Panic Meter episode about like freaking out about, hey, I got to start, Jahmyr Gibbs and Amon-Ra St. Brown, and like my only replacement for TJ Hawkinson is Sam Laporta. Like, am I freaking out about? Yeah, who cares? Not in this game, baby. Not with a 53.5 point total. I mean, this is a get everybody in the pool game, and I think we know most of the dudes on the Lions, right? Like, you can feel comfortable starting all those names I mentioned, of course, in addition to David Montgomery. But are there any ancillary players that stand out in this game to you?
Detroit, I just want to say briefly, Detroit's a perfect fantasy offense because the quarterback doesn't run and the ball goes to both their backs. It goes to the sun god. Sam Laporta right now is the tight end 1 overall in the season. And we've all been force-fed the idea that you never draft rookie tight ends. It's the biggest sucker play going. And he's got a real chance to end the season as tight end 1 with Travis Kelce still around. That's, to me, even if he doesn't do it, even if Kelce has a renaissance game, and man, has that been a long time coming, Laporte has been terrific. The Lions are just such an easy, I just don't even field Lions questions anymore because people, I think, know what to do. The harder question is, okay, Dak, fine. Lamb, fine. Nobody needs any hand-holding there. Somebody may not want to play Pollard. We talked about Detroit being much better against the run. Brandon Cooks is the guy. He almost feels like a touchdown or bust guy for me because he never gets a ton of targets. Can we talk ourselves into... I think Pollard still has the 15 touches in his back pocket. That's such a currency in today's game for fantasy purposes that I think I'd lean towards starting him. Obviously, it depends on your alternatives. Does Cooks get enough weekly volume? Last week, he got the touchdown. Really pretty throw and catch, but he's not a target hog. Jake Ferguson is probably 5 or 6 on the tight end board. There's an easy play there. Is Cooks somebody you could play with a level of confidence?
Yeah, it's pretty hilarious. Like, perfect way to just encapsulate this is you look at the receiving prop lines, like the over-under for CeeDee Lamb is 100.5.
Of course it is.
100.
Probably going to go up all week, too. By the time you play it Saturday, it'll be like 107.
100%. But then Brandon Cooks is all the way down at 38.5. Michael Gallup's all the way down at 18.5. Like, that's the perfect way to encapsulate this receiver core. And I mean, we've seen Michael Gallup when there's been good matchups. Like, I'm thinking about the Eagles game, right? That was a clear cut. Like, if you are ever starting Michael Gallup, you're going to do it against the Eagles secondary, right? So that's maybe a way you could talk yourself into these guys. I have found it really hard to predict Brandon Cooks. I'm with you. He has been very which is strange to say for a player like him, because it's not as if he's like a big red zone threat, but he's just kind of, he's a little touchdown or bust-ish.
That's exactly how I would phrase it. Yeah, I mean, he almost feels like a tight end.
Yeah, no, he does almost feel like a tight end. On the Detroit side of things, you're so right to say that the Lions are such an easy, clean, comfortable fantasy kind of offense. Our biggest complaint all year was like, oh man, which running back is going to get touchdowns? Now the answer is both. They both get touchdowns. They both get carries inside the 5-yard line. Both these guys are just awesome in their individual roles, and their roles even overlap a little bit now, which is how you know Jahmyr Gibbs, like we talked about with Dalton yesterday, is just a stone cold baller. But Jameson Williams kind of coming on of late. He's quietly been a full-time player the last 2 weeks. His receiving prop is 33.5. And, this Dallas defense definitely more burnable on the ground. On the way I said it about the Cowboys, I can't imagine them not dropping back to pass like 40, 50 times. How is this team in Detroit not just going to give the ball a ton to Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery like over and over and over again? Because they're even more equipped, I think, to take advantage of the Cowboys' run defense and how they're light up the middle than Miami was last week, because that's an outside zone-based team.
Right. Detroit, I believe they're number one in adjusted line yards, which is the DVOA metric that measures run blocking skill. There's a lot of different ways to do it. You can do it with the eyeball test. The bottom line is any way you gauge offensive line play, the Lions come out really well in that. And Ben Johnson's going somewhere, offensive coordinator. That'll be tough next year, what to do. Laporta's big season, a lot of it is the touchdowns. He's got 9. No other tight end is more than 6. So you'll have to pay up for him next year. Do you want to do that? Do you trust a guy like Montgomery, who's not the most talented running back on his own team, if the coordinator changes? We know Goff is a good player. He's never going to be a great player. So the Lions could actually be kind of a tricky fantasy call next year, because you'll have to pay up for all of these guys. Even St. Brown might rise like half a round. I mean, he slipped into the second round of some drafts. Next year, he's going in the first round. You have to pay up for him. Gibbs will be an early pick too. But that's next year's problems. If you got to the fantasy fight, I'm sure, and our colleague Jorge Martin did a great piece talking about some of the right answers in fantasy and what he expects this week. There are a lot of Detroit Lions on fantasy championship rosters, and I'm sure there's a ton of CeeDee Lamb. So it just seems perfect that this game is on an isolated Saturday night platform for us, so we can all enjoy it. And I would be flabbergasted. I can't imagine. I mean, obviously the weather can't come into play. Mm-hmm. Detroit had that one bad game in Chicago. Whatever. Chicago's defense has been totally different since they retooled it. It was an outdoor game. Detroit's an indoor team. They're a finesse team. Dallas is kind of that way too. Again, you're going to have to. Not only do you have to score 30 to win this game, that may not even be enough. This could be like a 38-35 game. I think the total is totally justified, and I'm going to punch as many tickets on this game as I can. And you even mentioned Williams. I don't know if he's fantasy playable, but that prop sounded low. He can beat that on one catch, and they're using him more. We know they both want to manufacture some touches for him and take downfield shots to Williams. I bet he beats his receiving prop too.
Yeah, Jameson Williams has cleared 40 yards receiving in back-to-back games. He has 6 targets, 7 targets. And like I said, he's been more of a full-time player. This is a guy who was just playing like sparing snaps every now and again. It's not as if his snap count is necessarily risen. It's a 58 and 68% the last 2 weeks. But it's just the concerted effort to get him the ball in like real ways has been there. And this is the baby steps we got to take with Jameson Williams because of how his career has gotten started. A couple things just to follow up before we get out of this game. One, you mentioned Ben Johnson's definitely out the door this year if he wants it. Josina Anderson reported that he's asking for $15 million a year, or will be reportedly asking for $15 million a year as a head coach next year. He's going to be very coveted. I'm interested to see how they replace him on this coaching staff. I've had Lions fans tell me that Tanner Engstrand is the passing game coordinator, and he's like, obviously, when I was talking with them the last few weeks about how their route concepts, I think, in Detroit are some of the best in terms of spacing and getting the guys open, like everything working in concert with each other. You imagine the pass game coordinator has something to do with that. Mark Brunell is on this coaching staff. He's a quarterback's coach. He's done a great job with Jared Goff. JT Barrett, the former Ohio State quarterback, is the assistant quarterback's coach. So maybe they have a natural, like maybe Brunell gets bumped up and Barrett gets bumped up. There's something there. Hank Fraley, another former player, great offensive line coach. He's done a great job coaching that offensive line. I mean, even like Antoine Randall's on this coach staff. He's the wide receivers coach. You can feel that this is a really well coached offense. Last point here, again, before we get out of here, I just want to get you on the record here, Scott. The Cowboys right now are 5.5 point home favorites according to BetMGM. Are the Cowboys 5.5 points? I know they've been better at home than they have been on the road this year, and this is in Dallas. But are they 5.5 point? Are they 5.5 points better than the Detroit Lions right now?
Yeah, I regret not throwing out an official dart, when the line opened up at 6, because I just thought that line was too high. So I think I could only take the points in this game.
All right, let's move on to the second and final binge game here in Week 17. Miami Dolphins at Baltimore Ravens. Ravens are 3.5 point home favorites. Scott, what do you think? You could take this any direction you want to go here. Big game for the Ravens. If they win, they clinch home field advantage. If they lose, that goes down to 37%, and obviously it bumps up in favor of the Detroit Lions. The Miami Dolphins.
With all due respect to the game we just talked about, which is going to be a blast, the Dolphins-Ravens game is this week's oh my god game of the year. It's going to probably determine the number 1 seed in the conference. And
it's at 1 p.m. It's at 1 p.m.
Yeah, I don't get that. I have that on my notes. That why is this game lost in the 1 p.m. shuffle? It should have been at least moved to the second window, if not somehow. And I have no problem with the game they have Sunday night, Minnesota and Green Bay, but it would have been great there. I thought for sure, somehow this will be moved to 4 o'clock. And was there something in the Baltimore area they didn't want to play the game later? I forget if there was something locally that prevented that, but
I don't remember either.
We've been spoiled lately with the breakups of games have been so nice. I think last week we only had 6 early games, so you get to see more football. You get to we're trying to figure out what's happening, and you need to watch stuff. And even though I try to rewatch as many games as I can after the week, when the schedule has the right cadence like it did last week, it just makes it so much easier on me because I get to see a lot of stuff the first time around. And I'm going to have so many eyeballs on this game. What's going to happen is a lot of the other 1 o'clock games are going to suffer for my, either that or my head will be on such a swivel that I'll just be in a daze for 3 hours, which is many NFL experiences throw in the fact that it's championship week in fantasy, and that makes it even.
It's going to make for a fun Sunday recap show.
A fun Sunday for sure. Yeah. I will be so punchy by then. So I tweet and talk a lot about the MVP award, even though it drives me crazy. You've all heard my take. Why can't it be most outstanding player? Why does it have to be the quarterback on the high seed who's been playing well lately and all the recency bias? I don't know which entropy situation I want to root for. Okay. If Baltimore wins, hey, cool. As long as Buffalo is held serve against New England, that means we get an AFC East championship game next week. That's awesome. If Miami wins, that means all of this. Lamar Jackson has to be the MVP. Well, what if Miami wins and Tua's great? All of a sudden, here comes Tua. Tua's going to be the MVP, and people are like, "No, wait a minute. Tyreek Hill's really the best player on that team," and that's going to rage all week. I'm not going to enjoy either one of those. I didn't enjoy Baltimore. They were great. They kicked San Francisco's butt last week. They deserved it. But Brock Purdy lost that MVP in the first half when the turnovers and the Ravens defense was dominating the game. Lamar did not play well in the first half. He was terrific in the second half. And they play 60 minutes and the whole 3 hours count. I get it, but I'm just sick of where this MVP stuff is. But whatever. We're getting a great game this week. And either scenario, I'm kind of hoping that Baltimore wins because I want to see, I think Miami-Buffalo for the AFC East in Week 18 would be fantastic. I don't know how many games we'll have that kind of juice next week, so we'll get that. But a couple of guys, I talked about this, I think, last week on the Sunday show. De'Von Achane, he's gone from comes out of nowhere. He's a monster early in the season. Then he gets, he has a monster game against Denver. They throw up 70. He's running back 1. He's running back 4 the next 2 weeks. So he's looking like one of the right answers, him and Mostert. And then Achane gets hurt. Then he comes back. He only gets a couple of touches. Nobody wants to play. He sits another week. And then he comes back and he gets a ton of work. He gets 21 touches, which is not really his game. A ton of late game work against Washington. He's running back 6. Okay, everybody's going to play him again. Since then, he's done nothing. He hasn't been in the top 30 for fantasy points. it's just so hard to know what to do with guys like this, where he can make your week on one touch. He can go 70 yards. He's Tyreek Hill's the fastest guy in the field, but Achane's probably the second fastest, and man, Mostert can motor as well. They're obviously a track team in Miami. We've talked about that a lot, but I think a lot of people are going to be asking me Achane questions, and I'm going to probably, again, it's come down to alternatives. I'm probably going to be leaning towards not playing him just in the recent form and everything. And I know that can blow up in my face because he can score from anywhere on the field, and he's the player who can make your day with one touch. So I feel like that my timing's been wrong with Achane all season. I think a lot of people have gotten it wrong because once he got off to that blistering start, everybody was petrified to have him ever on the bench again. And then he has that monster game against Washington, which was more about the usage, but whatever. He looked healthy to me. And since then, they've treated him kind of with kid gloves.
Yeah, treating him with kid gloves. It is worth noting Tom Pelissero reported today that Jalen Waddle is unlikely to play in Week 17, and talk about a guy that's just been banged up every which way this season. There are, like, if you really squint at it, some on-off splits in terms of Jalen Waddle when the run game is really kicking butt. I wonder if maybe they unleash Achane, because it's not as if they're pretty banged up too. I think Robbie Chosen, or whatever his name is these days, I think he had a concussion or something last week too. So if you're trying to talk yourself into Achane, I'm not necessarily there, but if the people out there, if you've got like a feeling and you want to start Achane, I'm here to tell you, like, just to follow your gut and your own intuition. I know Scott is the same way. If you want to talk yourself into it somehow, I think the Jalen Waddle absence is one way to do it, but it is difficult when they had a good run game matchup. Like I said, wasn't perfect because they're an outside zone team, and Dallas really struggles more when you can run like man gap concepts up the middle against them because they're light in the pants, in the linebacker and the interior defensive line spot. Wasn't perfect, but he didn't smash in that matchup. Is he didn't just come out and smash against the Ravens? I don't know. You can, like I said, you can go which way. It depends on your own intuition and your own feeling for your Week 17 championship matchups. On the Baltimore side of things, again, we know Lamar is locked in. It's a tough defensive matchup. That's why this will go a long way. If the Ravens can win this game for Lamar's MVP candidacy, it's going to go a long way for that because this has been a good defense of late. We know he's still locked into your lineups. He should be locked into your lineups, but like Gus Edwards, Zay Flowers, Isaiah Likely, are these guys you're kind of trending towards wanting to play here in Week 17?
Likely and Flowers, definitely. I thought Flowers was, for most of Sunday night, the best player on the field. Maybe that turned to Lamar in the second half. But Zay Flowers, that guy's like a human joystick. He can just move his body in any position. Such a great route runner. I know you liked him coming out of Boston College. And Likely, I think he was tight end 4. Then last week he moved down a little bit. It was a good tight end scoring week, and he didn't have a touchdown. But I'm a little bit sad. Look, I love Mark Andrews. I want Mark Andrews to make a full recovery and do Mark Andrews things next year. But I'm a little bit frustrated that Likely is ready for a breakout year. Yeah. And I don't know that. Look, maybe they'll be creative. Maybe they'll just decide to make one of those guys. I mean, obviously Andrews has a lot of wide receiver skills. He played a lot of wide receiver in college. Likely can certainly run wide receiver routes. So maybe they just become they've always been an unconventional offense, but maybe they decide to do something creative where both of them can play. It's uncommon for a team to carry two tight ends who can score in fantasy productive ways, but Likely he's just a fun player, and I love Zay Flowers. I wish I could feel better about. I know Odell Beckham. I talked about Achane, the one play that makes your week. I feel like Odell Beckham has a 70-yard touchdown in him every week. They'll try to do it. They'll take some shots at him for him. I don't know if they'll hit or not. The thing is, he's going to be a rotational player. He'll never have a lot of routes. He'll never have a lot of snaps. He'll never have a lot of targets. So the floor is zero. He's almost like their version of Gabe Davis, who's the boomiest and the bustiest of all the receivers, and that's who Odell Beckham is right now. But and then you know what you're getting into with Gus Edwards. He needs to score a touchdown because if he doesn't get a touchdown, he's probably going to have 4.5 points.
Yeah, this total is 47. I could see it going under, just because these are two really good quality defenses.
I would skew under too, and that's why the 53.5 in Dallas, Detroit really catches my eye because it's a touchdown removed from even other games where the total is optimistic, but because both of these teams could conceivably come out running the ball, and I think Baltimore wants to be aggressive when they pass. I don't think they want to pass aggressively. If you can see the distinction, I don't think they want to come out and throw it all over the yard. I think when they do, they want to take shots, but they don't want Lamar throwing 50 passes or 40 passes or something like that. I think they want a balanced offense.
I think they are comfortable finally unleashing him in that way. But like to your point, they don't want to be in game strips where they need to do that because they have a great defense and they can lean on the run game in the red zone especially. All right, let's move to the stream category here, starting with Sunday Night Football game, Green Bay Packers at Minnesota Vikings. Jaren Hall is going to start for the Minnesota Vikings. That was just announced moments ago. So they go from Kirk Cousins to Jaren Hall to Josh Dobbs to Nick Mullins back to Jaren Hall. So I think this does change the Vikings offense a little bit. Now, the Vikings are 2-point home favorites. It's a 46.5 point total. We barely saw much of Jaren Hall before he got banged up and left the game. And then Josh Dobbs' sanity took over there for a little bit. We don't have a ton of background on who Jaren Hall is, but again, they were dropping back a ton. You know, they were definitely throwing aggressively with Nick Mullins out there. I don't know if they're going to do that with Jaren Hall, but with the injuries in Minnesota's tight end and receiving room too, I can't imagine that again. They want to drop back and pass a ton, but they haven't been a great run team all year.
First of all, just good on the Vikings for giving us this, because it would have been very easy for them to be coy and then unleash it to us Sunday in the middle of the day or Sunday right before kickoff. And then some people in Superflex needed Mullins, or some people maybe if Addison isn't going, they wanted to play KJ Osborne. They weren't sure how to feel. At least we have the information now. At least you can make an informed choice. And I agree with you. I think Kevin O'Connell, who has done a good job with a very unpreferred hand, right? I mean, they lose Cousins. They've used so many different guys, and they've been Jefferson missed 8-9 weeks. It feels like Justin Jefferson missed almost the entire season, and that's just no fun when Justin Jefferson is hurt. But they've been competitive. But last week was the Mullins experience. He throws for 4 bills. He takes 4 sacks. He throws 4 interceptions. I'm like, okay, if the Saints aren't going to play Jameis Winston, it's nice that Minnesota's playing a version of Jameis Winston, at least the Tampa Bay Jameis Winston. I know Jameis has been more avoidant of negative plays in his Saints time, but it was just that's fun for fantasy. It drives coaches crazy. It's like, I love a hockey game that's 7-6. It drives every goalie and every coach crazy, but I like it. I enjoyed Nick Mullins playing with his hair on fire, but I can see why the Vikings are doing something different. But I think your instincts are right on here, where it's okay. Let's play a different quarterback, and we're going to be able to run the ball. We couldn't run the ball in Detroit last week. They prioritized it. Chandler was not a factor. Let's get our feet on the ground. Let's stay on schedule. Let's support our quarterback, not ask him to carry us. And that probably means that they just lost like 15 to 20% of their expected pass volume.
They've been so hit or miss too, from just like the style of offense they've been. Ty Chandler was a mess in pass protection last week, and his overall fantasy production was down just because they weren't establishing the run. But how can they not go back to establishing the run a little bit here with the Green Bay Packers on the other side of it? And on the that defense is just such a mess. They're in full chaos mode there. They got to completely start over from a coordinator standpoint in the offseason. They've now made Jair Alexander the most hilarious, weirdest 1-game suspension for conduct detrimental to the team of all time. But on the Packers offensive side of things, this receiver room is still incredibly banged up. What do we think is going to happen here with this Packers offense? Worth noting, Jaden Reed and Luke Musgrave got back to practice on Thursday. Watson and Dontavian Wicks were not at practice.
I really want to see Reed go, because he's somebody I could play proactively. Now, he's had the best season of all of those guys, but it's just been fun to watch the Green Bay passing game grow up together. Love's first season as a starter, and they have the youngest receiving room in the league. They have young tight ends, and they've all played pretty well. Nobody has, I would say, has smashed, but Reed has shown the potential to be a special player, and I still think they could manufacture more looks for him. LaFleur's a good coach, and I'm certainly in his corner, but I'd love to see the second year. A lot of times this stuff develops a little bit slower than we'd like, and then maybe the light really goes on next year for Love and some of these guys as they grow up together. But if Reed is confirmed, if Reed's clear to go, he's somebody I could play. I would probably have him in my top 30. So a proactive play, unless your receiver room was really loaded. And I think the games should be, even if I talked all about Minnesota maybe scaling back the offense and trying to be more balanced and everything, but I think there'll be points in this game. I think you'll have to score 24 to 27 to win this game. So I feel proactive about the borderline picks in this game, that I'd probably lean towards starting them.
if you want to push yourself into Jaden Reed, think about like this is a very blitz heavy defense, and the way that the Lions chose to beat that was with quick passes to Amon-Ra St. Brown last week. That worked extremely well, and that has been who Jaden Reed is on this Packers team. They get him the ball in some manufactured way on quick passes. Now I think they overdid it when they went against a blitz heavy team against the New York Giants on Monday night. It was like, all right, we don't need the Jaden Reed like rushing plays. We got enough of those. We need like maybe one or two a game. We don't need that many, but they got the ball in his hands, and obviously for fantasy, that's a good thing. So, and he's a great player. I'm with you that I'm super high on what I've seen from Jaden Reed this year. All right.
One more thing on this game. I don't think you mentioned this, and if you did, call and cut this out. This is basically an elimination game. If the Packers win, again, thanks to Colin for getting all these great notes in here. If the Packers win, they're 63% for the playoffs per the New York Times playoff odds. If they lose, they're down to 2%. You need 8 million things to go right. And Minnesota's another version of that. 48% if they win, 5% if they lose. So this is a game, division rival, Sunday night. Again, I would rather have the Baltimore-Miami game here, but I'll take this game because both teams, they don't like each other, indoors. And both teams are fun, both teams are flawed, and both teams need the game like blood. Let's do it.
All right, next game up here, Cincinnati Bengals at Kansas City Chiefs. Chiefs are 7-point home favorites, 43.5, 44-point total here. Scott, I mean, these are two teams not coming off their best efforts. The Bengals got waxed by the Steelers. Their defense was hugely disappointing. Browning, couldn't shoot their way out of that game. But then, man, Kansas City in the same week. Like to call it a slog would be kind. What we saw with them against the Raiders on Christmas Day.
I just stopped believing that there's a monster under the bed with the Chiefs. It's great that Rashee Rice has been promoted to mostly a full-time player. I know they still have some sort of wide receiver rotation there, but he's good. And last week, I think this is the first week this had happened. Rice actually had a higher receiving prop than Travis Kelce, which is just, man, I didn't see that coming, but Rice, he was the most targeted player. He had the most yards. I realized Kansas City didn't do much on offense. It's hilarious they lost this game last week where the Raiders scored the 2 touchdowns on defense. Then they basically just stopped throwing the ball. And every Raider game is kind of crazy, although they're a fun crazy. We'll talk about them a little bit later. I was ready to give you a good, strong CEH pitch, and now it turns out he's not going to practice on Thursday due to illness. I hope that's not a big thing because even if Pacheco goes, and I realize we're not talking about a ton of volume here, but CEH has been really good in the past game. Andy Reid designs as good a screen as anybody. I feel very confident that CEH is going to beat his receiving prop, and I'd like him a lot as a fantasy starter if Pacheco didn't play. And I think CEH could even be flex worthy maybe if Pacheco does go because Kansas City they don't have that many downfield wins right now. And seems like I think they need to hit a couple of screenplays in this game because MVS deep, that's not working. Tyreek Hill, he's not coming through that door. They've drafted poorly for the most part. Rice is a hit, but a lot of picks wrong. The trade for Tony hasn't worked out hilariously so. So I think the running backs need to be involved. Pacheco, you would play him if he gets cleared, but I think CEH, who most people, I've kind of ignored him the last couple of years. Ball accepted they made a mistake drafting him. McKinnon's out for the year. I think CEH is important to them. And that said, I'm not fearing the Chiefs, man. Mahomes, last 2 months, he's been a top 10 quarterback once. And I don't even blame him. I'm going to give him the Robin Williams, Goodwill Hunting. It's not your fault because it's not your fault. This team, it's just so frustrating to watch a Chiefs team that can't score quickly anymore. Everything has to be a 13-play drive.
Oh, it was rough. And I think last week was his worst game. Like that was partially his fault last week. And it's just you can only live in this environment and do this over and over again without developing bad habits. It's going to happen to any player. To follow up on a couple of your points there. Yeah, the Bengals are 29th in rushing success rate allowed. This is a good matchup for whoever is taking the most snaps at that running back position for the Kansas City Chiefs. And this week as well, Scott, over under for Rashee Rice, 63.5 yards. Over under for Travis Kelce, 62.5. So there has been a little bit of a flip there. I mean, this would be the week for Travis Kelce to turn in a vintage performance because A, they need it so badly, and B, the Bengals struggle up the spine of that defense. They lost safeties in the off season. This has really been an issue in an area all year where you could attack. They've been some of the worst teams in terms of giving up production to tight ends this year. And just think about like George Pickens ripping them up the heart on the first drive of that game last week. That's an area of the field where there's been tackling issues, coverage issues. So yeah, this is definitely a spot where you could get to Travis Kelce. It's kind of tough to talk about the Bengals right now because, I mean, we don't know if Jamar Chase is going to play in this game, but anything like you want to kind of leave the people with from a Bengals perspective here.
Just to put a period on Kelce, I did move him down the tight end 3. I have Kittle over him. No roster would make sense with Kelce and Kittle on the same team. That's probably not even a question. You could maybe have Laporta and Kelce on the same roster, and I would lean towards Laporta. If you wanted to play Ingram over Kelce, I'd listen to you. That's it, though. Don't be silly. Don't be. Again, I'm going to talk to you about Gerald Everett later. I'm not saying play him over Travis Kelce. I moved him down the tight end 3. He's still consensus tight end 1. So he's still the biggest guy in the field. He's always going to be, and you would think he's still getting 7 to 10 targets off the bus. It is what it is. Jake Browning, last month, this is a cherry pick stat because Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen missed a game in that period because they had their bye week. But in the last month, the quarterback 1 overall is Jake Browning. So what a world we live in. At least last week he got home for fantasy in a game that they did not play well. And then, I get it. The game flow, they got behind, they had to throw. T. Higgins had a big game, but man, T. Higgins I got to figure he's on Kate Majuke's fade list this week because he's going to see a lot of Snead, and Snead just doesn't allow anybody to do anything. So I think the Bengals is depending if Chase doesn't go. Of course, if Chase plays, it totally changes everything. Then Snead goes to Chase. But if Chase is out and Higgins draws Snead, I think you have to ignore that Higgins was good last week and back it off. I'm impressed at the Bengals. Their coaching staff maybe is better than I wanted to believe. I thought a lot of their success, and I know they went to a Super Bowl a couple of years ago, but I was giving more of that credit maybe to the players than the coaching. And I'm thinking that maybe maybe Zach Taylor and his staff are doing a better job than I realized because they haven't. And look, they got beat by Pittsburgh, and that was a decisive loss. But I thought when Burrow got hurt, it's like, okay, Bengals season over, cancel the season, everybody go home, and they're competitive. I think they'll be competitive in this game. The line is only 7. I could only take Cincinnati in this game. I think the Bengals will find a way to score 20 points, something like that. This feels like a 23-20 game to me.
AFC East matchup for our next one here. New England Patriots at Buffalo Bills. Bills are 13.5-point home favorites. It's a 40.5-point over-under. If the Bills win, they have a 98% chance to make the playoffs. If they lose, they're still at 47%. Obviously, like you said, if the Dolphins lose and then the Bills win, it sets up a pretty exciting Week 18 matchup that will almost certainly be the NBC win or big consequential game that they put on Sunday Night Football in Week 18. That's always how they do things because that schedule's kind of up in the air. I don't know if you have a lot of notes on the Patriots. I will just say this is my big note on this game is if you're looking to find the Steph Diggs bounce back game, it could certainly be this week. Obviously, over the course of Diggs' career, he's crushed the Patriots, consistently crush the New England Patriots. I'll just find the Ian Hartitz tweet I have on this one. In his last few games with the Patriots, he has 785 and a touchdown, 792 and a touchdown, 7104 and a touchdown, 658 and a touchdown. His last 4 regular season meetings with the Patriots. His first read target share was the most among pass catchers last week. I'm a little concerned. Maybe there's an injury that's not being reported because his snap counts have been down the last 2 weeks. But I think a lot of the stuff before that was mostly there are some drops from Diggs. There's some misfires from Allen. It's a little bit of both type of stuff going on there. But then, these last 2 weeks, it's mostly been a game plan thing, an opponent type of situation. Diggs did still come up clutch on the final drive. When I watch him play, Scott, when I chart him for reception perception these last couple games, there's no difference in terms of him separating or anything like that on some of these, single coverage routes. He's definitely drawn still a lot of double teams and everything. But again, if you want to spot the Steph Diggs bounce back spot, I think it could be this one against a defense that he has tormented in man coverage the last few years.
Man, I sure hope so. It's just depressing to call up the game logs, and it
is depressing.
66, 46, 56, 13, 57, 57. Those are his wide receiver rankings in half-point PPR over the last 6 weeks. And since the coordinator changed, the Bills have been more comfortable, more balanced, more with James Cook is getting more involved, and there's been games where Josh Allen hasn't thrown the ball a lot. Sometimes they've been comfortably ahead. I mean, they were so far ahead of Dallas, a game where you thought the opponent would fight back that made sense. I even think last week the Chargers was just a setup game. The Chargers had played so poorly the week before. How could you expect Buffalo's best out? The league is about so much emotional ebb and flow. How could you have your best result after you just had maybe your best game of the year in dispatching a good Dallas team? So that letdown spot kind of made sense. It's interesting that Diggs has done so well against the Patriots because we've all heard this and you're probably sick of hearing it. Well, Belichick will identify the best thing you do and he'll take it out of the game. Well, for many of those matchups, Stefon Diggs was the guy to take out, and they have not taken him out. That he is feasted here. I was on the Buffalo WGR, their radio station this morning, and they were playing a clip of Josh Allen talking about how he knows that Steph Diggs has to be a foundation of their offense, and they need to fix what hasn't been right lately. And I like hearing that because a lot of times when teams are winning, you think, well, okay, let's just keep doing what we're doing. And there's nothing to fix here. I like that they are prioritizing it or being asked about it. It's conscious of mind. And Diggs is the number one receiver. They all have egos. I'm sure he wants to get fed. So I did move Diggs down into the RB, really high-end RB wide receiver 2 territory, but you'd have to be incredibly loaded at receiver to play him. I didn't want to encounter the idea of putting him on the bench. I think he has to be a start. I think Cook has to be a start. Obviously, Josh Allen, you don't need any help there. And I'll say this for Gabe Davis. I'll tell you right now, he's going to get 17 points or 2, or maybe 0. Yeah. That's maybe what Gabe Davis. That is the Gabe Davis experience. I think he has 3 bagels in his last 5 starts, but then he blew up against the Chargers. So that's what you're signing up with Gabe Davis. Not that anybody came here for Patriot content, but at least Zappy's been a little bit better than Mac Jones. If you are super screwed at receiver, I could play Douglas or Parker. They haven't been that bad. Zeke's going to get 15 to 18 touches. That's a currency at running back. I'm afraid the Patriots defense might be good enough to make this kind of a muddy game. It might be like a 24-10 type of game where Buffalo doesn't go crazy, but they do enough to win and they win convincingly. And maybe the end of the game, it's okay. Let's Latavius Murray it up. Let's just, maybe Leonard Fournette gets in the game, whatever. And it's just one of these things where it's like, okay, I needed more from my Bills than I got, even though they won this game comfortably. But please don't bench Stefon Diggs.
Yeah, and Josh Allen even said it after the last game. They're in, we don't care what it looks like, we just need wins mode. And I think that is definitely going to be indicative of the final score of this game. I don't really look. I don't have any more notes on the Patriots other than just I am interested to see if Demario Douglas can be like a foundational player for this team. Obviously, it's going to be a new coaching staff next year. A lot of stuff's going to get cleaned out, but if he can continue to stack good performances both in the stat sheet and on film, I think that he could be a guy that has some staying power. I think he's a legit player. Next game up here, Raiders at Colts. Colts are 3.5 point home favorites, 43.5 point over under. Pretty big one in terms of playoff odds for the Colts. 73% chance to make the postseason according to the New York Times if they win this one. It's 28% if they lose. If Michael Pittman's not a part of this game this week, Scott, and we don't know that at the time that we're taping, he was in the concussion protocol at least up until yesterday. I think the Colts might be on upset watch because he's so critical to their offense, and we saw that against the Falcons. Like, they put Gardner Minshew in a blender, easily his worst performance of the season, and we know that the Raiders defense has been hot under Antonio Pierce.
Right, the Raiders, the 36% chance of the playoffs. If they win, they're eliminated. If they lose, that Raiders defense, the number one, and number 7 defense the last 3 weeks. And I get these runbacks are random and fluky and all that, but Max Crosby's playing his tail off. And this team, they went from a coach that everybody there seemed to dislike in McDaniels to a guy in Antonio Pierce who has rallied this team. They just beat the Chiefs. They beat them with defense. They obviously did what they did to the Chargers in front of a national TV audience the previous week. They're playing hard, man. And I do think the Colts are on upset watch. The good news, Pittman, it sounds like Pittman did practice on Thursday. I'm seeing on the fabulous internet. So he's so, it's funny. I gave out the Colts as a pick last week. And then when Pittman was scratched, I'm like, well, I wish I could take this back, but it's already out there. I've already committed to it. I'm not going to tell somebody a half hour before the pick doesn't count. It's just, you have to live with it. You hope maybe they'll find something else that works. They did not find something else that works. He's that important to them. But even with an active Pittman and hopefully a healthy Pittman, I think the Raiders could win this game. Now, if you're thinking about Zamir White, I talked about maybe CEH is playable, even in a situation where Pacheco plays. Zamir White needs Josh Jacobs ruled out. You'll have to roll through that. And unfortunately, last week, a lot of people who needed White couldn't get the information in time because the game was a day later. But I think Zamir White's a pretty good fantasy start if Jacobs doesn't go. because the Raiders don't want O'Connell deciding this game. And unfortunately, that's made Devontae Adams kind of a fantasy mess. Jacoby Myers was a nice story for about 2 months. I feel like that's expired now. The Raiders have become a ball control, snarling defense kind of team. Let's win this. They want to win this game. They would love a 13-10 game if they can get it.
Yeah, that's the clear-cut identity of that team. It's been, and Antonio Pierce has not hid that when he's talked to the media. I will say, to steal Scott Pianowski, the SAT thing here, if you're looking to find your way back to Devontae Adams, if you just gotta start him because you don't have a better option that you're feeling comfortable with. If you just look at Aiden O'Connell's completions since December, it's 21, it's 20, it's 9. Usually it's just, again, to steal the SAT thing, Scott, the next one is not going to be 9 again. It'll probably be up there in the 20s. And look, Adams is never going to have the ceiling that you wanted when you drafted him, but I think he can get back in your starting lineup if you just simply use that logic. Next game up here, a critical one for the visiting team. LA Rams, 5.5 point road favorites going to New York to take on the Giants, 44.5 point over under here. New York Times lets us know that the Rams, if they win, they have an 87% chance to make the postseason. But as high as we are on this offense and the way they've looked of late, if they lose this game, 16% chance. That is a huge drop off for the LA Rams. So this is pretty close to a must-win game for them as possible.
For sure. And you don't need hand-holding on your primary Rams. They start themselves. There's a lot of league-winning talk with guys like Williams and Kupp and Nakua. I want to point out DeMarcus Robinson. They've become a 3-wide receiver team over the last few weeks. He's got touchdowns in 4 straight games.
Scott, I told you last year Robinson was going to be good for the Rams. I told you.
You probably did. I just, just more proof that I don't listen, Matt. But
I'm making a Allen Robinson joke.
Oh, right, an Allen Robinson joke, of course. Yes, is he still playing for the Steelers, or has he moved on to another team?
He's blocking his ass off. Don't worry.
Right. The Steelers, right? Their wide receivers block. Hines Ward, Allen Robinson, George Pickens. He runs hard when he's got the ball. I'll give him that.
Yeah.
So DeMarcus Robinson, last 3 games, you see the touchdowns in 4 straight weeks. You think, okay, stone fluke. How often is he even playing this guy? Well, the last 3 weeks, 86% snaps, 95% snaps, 93% snaps. And this is what Sean McVay does. When he's cultivated an offense now, it's like, okay, I trust Kieran Williams. You're not coming off the field. I'm using a very narrow tree. And I guess, maybe Tyler Higbee's not a big part of the offense anymore. They don't really have great tight end depth behind him. I know it's usually about the 3 amigos. I guess Robinson's kind of a 4th amigo. And coaching is so important in the NFL. I think Dable's done the best he could this year with a really bad hand. The DeVito thing expired last week. They're going back to Tyrod Taylor. But I got to figure McVay has the Rams ready to play, and they win this game convincingly. And I would think they're only given 6 in this game. I think the Rams are going to win by 17 or 20 points. This will not be competitive.
I think Taylor can keep look, it's not like we're doing too much to say, but I think he can keep them more competitive than DeVito probably would have. If you just look at the Rams pass defense, they've been, I think they're a good pass defense overall, but just in terms of schedule adjusted fantasy points allowed, a great metric from 4for4. They're 28th in schedule adjusted fantasy points allowed to quarterbacks. So if you're just trying to get to Tyrod Taylor in a super flex league, I think he probably gives you a bit of a better chance than Tommy DeVito would.
Well, let me ask you this though. I was talking to some of my Patriot friends today, and we were trying to figure out, what team in the NFL would you trade all the Patriot receivers for? Is there a team that's worse off at receiver than the Patriots? And one of 2 teams, the only 2 teams that were floated were Arizona and the Giants. And I think just give me a healthy Hollywood Brown and I would take Arizona. I don't care about the rest of the guys, but I think the Giants their receiver room might be down as bad as the Patriots.
Yeah, their receiver room is rough. I'd still nominate the Carolina Panthers in there though.
Yeah, I should have. That's what I'll do when I get off. And when I get off the show, is I'll Adam Thielen's great, but he's got no touchdown equity. They have not gotten Mingo going, so and maybe Mingo's just not going to be a thing. It's just so hard to know because they missed the quarterback, and Young he's just not going to get any taller. I don't know. Carolina's. I'm glad that they've won a couple of games, and I think they've done the best they can with a really bad situation, taking the wrong quarterback and all that. But Taylor, the Taylor thing reminds me a lot of Washington where you need to have competitive integrity in your locker room. Like maybe more with Washington's like, well, why are you benching Sam Howell? Well, you can't look Terry McLaurin straight in the eye and say, yes, we're playing our best quarterback, because you're not. At some point, you just have to do what's best for everybody else around you, even if it doesn't make sense long term, because you're supposed to be evaluating and developing Sam Howell and all that. I know it's not quite the same thing with the Giants, because nobody thinks Tommy DeVito is anything more than a deep backup and probably a number 3 quarterback for the rest of his career. And I'm glad DeVito went and cashed in as much as he could and got those pizzeria appearance fees while he was interesting to the people in the New York area, because that came and it went. And look, he didn't ask for this. He didn't ask to play on a team that had no offense and no blocking and everything. It's even nice to see Tyrod Taylor play, because the way his career ended with the Chargers, he gets this inadvertent shot and all of a sudden Justin Herbert emerges and Taylor's, not only an afterthought, but he's a little bit of a punchline, no fault of his own. I've always liked Tyrod Taylor. I think he's a perfect backup in today's NFL, just like I think Brissett is. I think these guys are really dangerous and can play for an extended period of time, maybe not good enough to start. I feel that way about Minshew too. I mean, he gets exposed if you play him for 3 months. He's great if you only need him for a month. All that said, Rams by 17.
Next game up here, New Orleans Saints at Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Bucks are only 2.5-point home favorite. That's interesting. 42.5 point total here. Bucks clinch NFC South. If they win this game, the Saints will be eliminated with a loss. Their seasons is kind of on life support generally. I've been saying all week, Scott, I think the player I was most wrong about this year was Baker Mayfield, and therefore the team I was most wrong about was the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And like the way I talked about them in the offseason versus how I feel when I watch them now could just not be any more different. I think this team rocks from an offensive standpoint. I think Baker he's played well, just period. And the situation has been better because the coaching, like from what Byron Leftwich was doing last year to what Dave Canales is doing as the offensive coordinator this year, it's like night and day stuff. So just real good vibes around the Bucs right now. Like I said, I can't believe they're only a 2.5 point favorite here. I don't know that there's a ton of like sneaky fantasy plays here in this game, because it's kind of a start your guys offense, both teams. And the Saints are weird, but I don't know. Scott, where do you think for this one?
The Bucs are easy. They're deliciously narrow. Baker's been really good. Rashad White's been one of the right answers at running back. You know what you're getting with Evans and Godwin. There's like nothing to really say about these guys. On the Saints side, I wrote in my sleepers piece, I put out Derek Carr there because he's under 50% rostered in Yahoo. And I said, recommending Derek Carr to me is like recommending the gas station sandwich. But sometimes you're on a highway and there's not another stop for 30 miles and you're hungry and you have to get the gas station sandwich. Quarterback 7, quarterback 3 the last 2 weeks. He was terrible in the first matchup against Tampa Bay, but that was in the first month of the season. I just don't care about games that were that far in the rearview mirror.
That was also one of those games too where he came back like when no one thought he was going to play from that devastating shoulder injury against the Packers. And then he came out there and he was just checking down to Alvin. That was the game he had like Kamara had 13 catches and 33 yards or something.
Yeah, he had the Breece Hall game. So the Jets box score from last week was just crazy, man. Anyway, we'll get to that later and hopefully talk about it very briefly. I'm fine. I just want to say we need to make up some time. You know what you're doing with your Bucks. Green light, press play. If you need a streamer quarterback, Derek Carr would be the first guy I would look for. And I'd like to point out Juwan Johnson. When you're streaming a tight end, you're thinking touchdown, and he scored touchdowns the last 2 weeks. He had 7 targets last week. So he's got goal line equity. Taysom Hill, since he got hurt, he's come back. He's hardly playing. I realize he's only a tight end, kind of in name only. But I feel like Juwan Johnson, if you lost TJ Hawkinson and you didn't get Everett or somebody like that, but one of maybe Chig or somebody, Juwan Johnson might make sense for you.
Next game up here, San Francisco 49ers are 12.5 point road favorites going into Washington to take on the Commanders. This game's got a high over-under because we expect the 49ers to score all over the Washington Commanders defense. So I don't know that we need to spend a lot of time. As long as Purdy's out there, we know what this offense is going to look like and we know what they're going to do. From a Washington standpoint, Scott, it's like, yeah, Jacoby Brissett's been super efficient the last 2 weeks in relief. Can he come in here and just stabilize this offense? I think he can, but how excited can we get about the skill position players going against a good 49ers defense?
Yeah, let's see, 49.5. So I guess the implied total is something like 31-18 San Francisco. And I feel like San Francisco's already got 40 points in their back pocket. There are, as much as I said, press play on all the Bucks. That's, smash, break your computer, making sure you start all your 49ers. That nobody needs any help with that. At least Brissett, again, how was his limitations have been shown this year. I think they just had to, for competitive integrity, they had to bench him. And Brissett's played well in relief. Those games can be misleading a lot of times. You come in certain circumstances, the defense maybe is giving you things they wouldn't give you in a start. They haven't prepared for you, all that stuff. But at least I can squint and see maybe Terry McLaurin does something. Maybe Samuel does something. All that said, my notes here, so I talked about the competitive integrity of getting Brissett to start, and I said this game has 42-10 written all over it. Whatever San Francisco's team total is, and the team totals aren't always the same as the implied total. And that's another thing. If you want to bet over on anything, here's a pro tip: take it early, because the lines on overs generally rise as the week goes on, especially with player props. You want to bet the San Francisco team prop? I'd bet it right now. They're going to score 42 points.
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, it's just to get everybody in the pool game for the San Francisco 49ers. Their team implied total is 30.5 on BetMGM. The over is minus 125. So yeah, I think that's going to go up as the weeks go on. Yeah, or as the days go on into the week here. We don't even really know who's going to be playing running back for the damn Commanders at this point. Like, this is just a real rough, play out the string offense.
Yeah, Rodriguez out for the year, so it won't be him. Yeah. But how much is Gibson? Are they ready to get Robinson back? Coaching staff's probably going to get turned over at the end of the year too. So a lot of moving pieces with this Washington team.
Next game up here, Tennessee Titans at Houston Texans. 43.5 point total here. The Texans, they win, 45% chance to make the playoffs. So they're still hanging around the fringes there. Maybe CJ Stroud gets back in this game. And I think if that's the case, then you're kind of all in on Nico Collins in a really gettable matchup after he's at least saved the day with the touchdown deodorant last week.
Right. I mean, we know the Titans' funnel defense, they don't want you to run on them no matter what, and you can always find stuff downfield. It feels like Stroud's missed 2 months. I miss that guy. Nothing against Case Keenum, nothing against Davis Mills. They're quality backups. You don't want to start those guys, and they stole one of those games anyway because they've done a great job. Ryan's has done it. His staff, his offensive staff, have done such a good job. The defense is competitive too. So I'm totally with you. If Stroud goes, Nico has to go, and even if Stroud doesn't go, I think Nico is playable. He's just not as easy to play him. Yeah. On the Titans side, I'll just say I so badly want Chico Okonkwo to be a thing, and he had his best fantasy game of the year. I know it was only 6 catches. He had a touchdown. If you had to wait until December for him to pop, it's way too late. But maybe he's a little better with Tannehill. I think they'll play Levis if Levis is trending the way he is right now. But again, a lot of people, Hawkinson managers, they need somebody. I don't know if you've gotten Everett on your team. I talked earlier about Jawan Johnson, who's an option, but you would put Chico Okonkwo in that playable bucket too, and he's still rostered under 50% of leagues.
Yeah, this offense is just so much more exciting when Will Levis is back there. And, it's not a fun journey. I mean, well, it's a fun journey, but it's not a smooth ride. Let's put it that way. He did practice on Wednesday, so looks like we probably get Will Levis back there. And then CJ Stroud, just reading the Houston Chronicle, published 45 seconds ago that he did CJ Stroud practiced again on Thursday. Excellent. So limited practice Wednesday, practice Thursday. Just he's in phase 4 of the 5-step process to return to play. So he just needs to be cleared by team doctor, independent neurologist. So hopefully he gets out there and hopefully he does not suffer any more concussions, because it's been a rough year from that perspective on the CJ Stroud front. Final game in the stream category. Like I told you guys, it's a big beefy stream category here, and then not much in the binge and skip, but it's Pittsburgh Steelers at Seattle Seahawks. 3.5 point favorites are the Seattle Seahawks. 41.5 point total here. The Steelers, it's weird and true. It's weird, but it is true. If they win out, 92% chance to make the postseason. So they got to beat the Seahawks this week. Mm-hmm. Then they've got to beat the Ravens in week 18. We'll see where the Ravens are from a what have they locked up perspective. Are they playing backups? That type of thing. That's obviously the whole thing we'll get into with week 18 stuff. That's why you should be playing the championships this week. But I don't know, Scott. They're going to start Mason Rudolph again. Kenny Pickett might be healthy, but they might be starting Mason Rudolph. But I don't know, man. The Steelers are the Steelers. George Pickens obviously coming off a monster game after, rightly getting criticized for the effort that he was putting out there. Do you feel comfortable going back to George Pickens, who's been mega volatile this season?
I don't. I think, first of all, Rudolph has to. They have to keep him in there because Remember Pickett? When Pickett starts, you're getting one touchdown or you're getting 0 touchdowns from him. He never has multiple touchdown games. So
the fact that's the funniest part about so many quarterbacks starting this season is that after almost any of them play for any extended stretch, you'll get the like, this insert quarterback here has more multiple passing touchdown games in his career than Kenny Pickett. Like that's been the funniest part of this season.
I know they all pass Pickett on the limited amount of playing time. And who knew that Mason Rudolph would get George Pickens going? I think again, this may have been a repeat from Sunday night's pod, and if it is, I apologize. But these two teams strike me as I wish I had avoided everybody. I wish somebody had told me before the season, look, I know those Steelers look good. I know those Seahawks look good. Don't draft any of them. Every one of them has been a fantasy loss for different reasons. Look, Kenneth Walker, he's been hurt. The Seahawks offensive line fell apart with injuries almost right when the season started. Geno Smith has taken a step back. JSN's been okay, but not great. Lockett and Metcalf, I always feel like you have to play them, but you never really know what you're getting. Just like I feel like Deontay Johnson is a guy who's really hard to bench. And yet when he has a 2 for 16 game, is anybody really surprised? I don't think so. Both backs are going to play in Pittsburgh. It doesn't matter that the fantasy community likes Warren more. They're still going to use Harris a lot, probably more than Warren. This looks like one of 3 games, by the way. I don't know why there's 10 games at 1 o'clock. I don't know why they didn't do a Baltimore game. I don't get it. There's only 3 games at 4 o'clock, and this is one of them. And the totals are not juicy. The Bengals Chiefs game, which would have been 54 in our dreams, is 44.5. The Chargers Broncos are 37.5. And man, I could see that being a game played in the 20s total. And this is a 41.5 total. And I don't think anybody, you probably have to play Metcalf. Harris gets too many touches to bench him. Could you bench George Pickens after last week? I think you actually could. I don't think he's an automatic. He only had 6 targets. They don't want to throw the ball all over the yard. I'm not confident in anybody here. I will field questions. I'm sure somebody will ask me a Metcalf question, and I can't guarantee you the answer will be yes.
I'm with you. And he will get the Joey Porter Jr. treatment, which, T. Higgins got nothing on Porter last week, but then when he moved the one route in zone coverage, which is possible, right? I'm not saying bench DK Metcalf because of that, but that could lead you to big games for Tyler Lockett or maybe a JSN type. Like, I don't know. I can see, and I was the idiot that was in on both of these offenses, like potentially taking a step in the preseason. And
I like them too. I said ton of not only ton of nice things about the Steelers. I said nice things about Kenny Pickett, which I would like producer Colin to destroy all copies of.
That would be great.
So I'm not. I didn't get this right. I have Seahawks.
Same with Geno. Me and Geno
I always have
too,
Tyler
man.
Lockett on my team. Tyler Lockett's been one of my guys, man. We will go down on that ship together.
We absolutely will until it fully crashes and burns. But yeah, the Seahawks is a big game for them. 87% chance to make the postseason if they win. Still 40% chance if they lose. So it's not a total dunzo. All right, let's get to the skip section here. We can be rapid fire on these ones, Scott. Atlanta Falcons and Chicago Bears is our first one up here. Bears are 3-point home favorites, 37.5 over under. Anything you'd like to offer the people on this game?
Yeah, bet whatever the interception prop is. Fish around for the best line. Whatever the interception prop is on Taylor Heineke, bet it. Arthur Smith is the source of all pain. And Justin Fields, he needs to be better support. Chicago set him up to fail. I get it. But all of the Justin Fields metrics, other than touchdown rate, are below code. And he's got that huge sack problem, which sacks are mini turnovers. Again, maybe if he gets in the right infrastructure, and we talked, is that Pittsburgh? Is that, I don't know, maybe he'd be a backup to a team that has better offense. I don't know. He needs to get traded. They need to shoot for a higher upside. I want to see what Justin Fields can do when he has help, but he needs to solve this sack problem.
He could be on this team next year. By the way, just if you're looking at BetMGM, the over-under on Taylor Heineke at 0.5 interceptions is -160. So that's
I wish the juice wasn't that bad. Maybe that's, you know what that is? That's screaming for a same game parlay where you bet like the Bears.
Oh yeah,
and you bet the Heineke picks, something like that. Sounds like a pretty good sandwich to me.
Next game up here, Arizona Cardinals at Philadelphia Eagles. Eagles are 10.5 point home favorites. Pretty beefy over under here for a skip game, 48 points. I put this in the skip, Scott, because it's like, what do we really need to say? The Eagles should wax the Cardinals. We'll learn nothing about the Eagles in this game, and you start all your players against the Cardinals.
Trey McBride, tight end 4 next year, tight end 5 next year. Is that too crazy?
I mean, Dalton, right before he kind of busted last week, Dalton was trying to talk him as the tight end 1 next year. So
how dare he slam Sam Laporta like that? But the thing with Laporta though is he's never going to be the priority target as long as they have St. Brown. Sure, Trey McBride. I looked at that receiver room. If I were Kyler Murray, I'd be throwing everything to Trey McBride these days. So I'm fine with that. You think AJ Brown is in the first round next year?
But he's like a second round pick.
Yeah, like a wheel pick. Okay.
We just did a first round, and by the time this show is live, the pod FFL will already be over. But we're doing a first round mock, or way too early first round mock for 2024 on the show. And spoiler alert: AJ Brown is not in that first round. So I bet
even with reception perception, Matt Harmon.
I took two receivers early, and then I did take a running back. Of course I did, and then I did take a running back at the 9th overall pick.
What receivers? Can you talk about the receivers?
I mean, yeah, like I said, but by the time this is up, the show will already be over. I took Jamar Chase at the 5th pick. And I took, I take that back. I took Christian McCaffrey because it was 4 of us, me, Sal Vetri, Jason Fitz, and Andy Behrens. I drew the first pick. I took Christian McCaffrey. Tyreek Hill went 2nd to Sal. CeeDee Lamb went 3 to Fitz. Justin Jefferson went 4 to Andy Behrens. I took Jamar Chase at 5. Actually, I take it back. I'm an idiot. I can't even read this. AJ Brown went 6 to Sal. I'm a liar. I completely lied to you. So there you go.
Just horrible work by Harmon there. By the way, shout out to Fitz and to Sal joining the team this year. And
yeah, great addition.
It just feels like you guys have worked together, for 10 years. It's obviously Behrens is like the easiest guy in the world to work with, but I've really enjoyed the chemistry of that team. And it's just, I think the show moving to Thursday has worked really well. So just props to all the talent, all the producers, all the people who put their work into that show. I think it's been an excellent program. And I'm sure not that you play for this, but I'm sure when all the awards and nominations come out, it usually gets recognition, and I'm sure it's coming again.
Well, I appreciate that, Scott. I know I echo the statements of it's been great to work with Fitz and Sal. And yeah, shout out to the whole production team. It was not an easy end of season finish for that team for a lot of different reasons, but shout out to them for pulling off some great work again, especially at the end of the year, and everybody that's been involved with that show has just been awesome. But final 2 games here: Carolina Panthers at Jacksonville Jaguars. Jaguars are 6.5 point home favorites, 37.5 point over under. Jags win. They got an 84% chance to make the playoffs, 47% chance if they lose, according to the New York Times. Jags, man, I want to bet against them right now, but they are playing the Panthers. I can't imagine the Panthers pull off an upset here. Jacksonville just got to get it together. They just got to get it together.
It sounded like Lawrence missed the beginning of Thursday's practice. I don't know what's going to happen later in the day or if he'll go Friday. Even if he plays, you get a feel like he's not 100%. I want to give shout out to Chuba Hubbard, who I've been calling the poor man's Rachaad White. Chuba Hubbard, last 6 weeks in half-point PPR, running back 20, 18, 24, 6, 11, and 25. That's good enough to start in every league I play in. I wish I had Chuba Hubbard everywhere. I mean, you don't think of him as a quote-unquote league winner, but he gets volume every week. 17, 24, 25, 25 touches, 19 touches. That's a currency, man. He gets cheap dump offs. Some teams don't even throw the. Miami's offense is all about getting rid of the ball really quickly. So like Mostert and Achane never get those dump off passes. Their catches have to be by design. Chuba Hubbard gets a lot of this Rachaad White stuff where I'm not sure how good Chuba Hubbard is. Maybe Rachaad White is just better than we thought. That could be part of his story. I don't think Chuba Hubbard is a special player at all. He's like a league average guy, but he's their league average guy, and he's going to get a ton of work in this game. He'll probably be running back 15 this week.
Yeah, I think that's very fair. And I'm still totally fine starting passing game players from whether it's Calvin Ridley, whether it's Evan Ingram on this Jacksonville side, but I am nervous about Travis Etienne. I don't know if you've managed to make it this long with Etienne in kind of a cold spell of the season here. He's definitely somebody I'm nervous about, but it's a great matchup for them to get that run game going, which has been a real troublesome spot all season for them.
Yeah, you at least figure the game script would be favorable for him. He was touchdown deodorant was saving his bacon, and I think he only has 2 touchdowns in his last 7 games. So I'm with you. Green light on the 2 pass catchers, on Ridley, on Ingram. It's a yellow light on Etienne.
Final game here in week 17 in the skip category. Los Angeles Rams at Denver Broncos. 3.5 point home favorites are the Denver Broncos. 37.5 point over under here.
Any news in these teams?
Nothing's been happening with this team of late. Look, I mean, the Russell Wilson discourse has been exhausting. I'm not going to go on a big rant about it here because I've spent way too much time on Twitter with it today, and I should have just logged off. But
that's why producer Colin put this last on the list. He knew if you put it in the middle, we just ran the risk of going off.
Exactly. And now, like an hour into the show, I don't have the energy to rail against a bunch of people on Twitter, which is stupid to do anyways. But I mean, this is very similar to the Derek Carr thing last year, where Derek Carr was probably like the 20th best quarterback in the NFL this year or last year. And Russell Wilson, I think, is probably about the 20th, somewhere between 15 to 20 quarterback in the NFL. 15 is disingenuous. Somewhere close to 20, 18, 20. He's better than he was last year, but he's not good enough to justify the contract. I love that people are talking about it like it's not a performance-based benching. Well, it's a performance relative to pay. Because, yeah, if he was playing like a top 5 quarterback like he's being paid as, they don't give a damn about that injury guarantee in 2025. And like, it's not as if I'm sure Lamar and Jalen Hurts and all these guys have similar guarantees in their contract, but their team's not thinking about benching them, right? So I don't know. And I'm not even a Sean Payton guy. Like, I'm not going to go here and defend Sean Payton for anything. So like, I don't know. All I know is, Scott, is that this Denver Broncos team is going to look very different next year than it looks right now. Because you talk about like who are some of the worst receiver cores. We were having this conversation earlier in the show. Without Courtland Sutton, like, you look at the guys that are playing for Denver, it's not a good group. It's a pretty rough group there. So I don't know that Jarrett Stidham's going to come in here and light this thing up. And it's not like they've been a great run team this year either. So that's why this team, okay, I'm certainly interested to see if Stidham can do anything in this game. He finished last season pretty well with the Raiders when he was in this same exact situation, especially that game against the 49ers. But I don't know. It's all about 2024 and beyond for the Denver Broncos. And this move to bench Russell Wilson officially, kind of put the clock on that.
For sure. Man, I know beginning of the year, I was optimistic about Jerry Jeudy. I wasn't pounding the table for him, but optimistic. I know you've not been a Jeudy guy, but I'll take a big L on that. It's frustrating to watch Jerry Jeudy play. And as much as I do think Marvin Mims has the potential to be a good player, he sure leaves a lot in the field. He makes a lot of mistakes. He turns the ball over. I can get why they don't have for a long time, I'm like, why isn't he playing? They should be developing him. They're not going anywhere anyway. And now I kind of understand why they've been reluctant to give him more of a share. They may have to this week, depending on the status of Courtland Sutton. The one thing that's been good in their offense. To get us out of here, give the Chargers credit. After a horrible game, they come back. They're professionals. They get paid. Whenever you see outlier performances, right? Buffalo hit the high end of their range against Dallas. The Chargers played as bad of a football game as you could play against the Raiders. When teams like that meet, you just have to reflexively take the points because the plexiglass principle that Bill James talked about, where things tend to just navigate more towards the middle. That's what we saw last week. The Chargers almost beat the Bills. Last 3 weeks, Gerald Everett has 8 targets in each game. Healthy scratch last week for Parham. At least Easton Stick and Everett seem to have something going. And the Broncos, by far, no matter how you want to evaluate how a team covers the tight end, you want to go just old school with the accumulated data, or you want to go new school with like DVOA stats, whatever. They're all going to say the Denver Broncos can't cover the tight end. Even Mike Gesicki got a touchdown against them last week. So I want you to play Gerald Everett in your final if you need a tight end. I want you to play his props, BFS, whatever. Gerald Everett, smash spot.
Love it. All right, buddy. That is going to do it for the Week 17 Viewer's Guide. Scott, you'll be back with me New Year's Eve. We're recording an episode. We are going to be popping bottles together, watching the ball drop as we finish the podcast here, so the people can catch us on New Year's Day.
Can't wait, man. It's always one of my favorite talks of the week, and I really enjoyed this one as well.
Hell yeah, buddy. You crush it on these preview episodes, crush it on the review episodes. I'm excited for Week 17 to get rolling here. It's going to be an interesting one. Like I said, you all out there, good luck in your fantasy championships if you're alive. If you're not alive and you're just simply watching the games, enjoy it. If you want to bet some props, we talked a little bit about stuff here today. In the meantime, though, be sure to tune in on Monday, New Year's Day, to hear Scott and I break down all the action from Week 17. Can't cure your hangover, but we can at least provide some solid analysis. Until then, Happy New Year. Enjoy the football. We are out.